expertise was prior to this?
Hold on a minute. I was born in Scotland and graduated at Aberdeen University and then came south. I started off in a teaching role, taught maths in a local school, and then this opportunity to join the amazing semiconductor industry came along, and at that time I didn't really know what semiconductor meant, but soon found out and began this career, this very exciting career, which lasted probably about 30 years. The career span was from the 70s, early 70s, really the early development of the integrated circuit to the microprocessor and so on, moving forward. My background, my experience was mainly with companies like Intel and Philips. I travelled worldwide with Intel and developed many industries, many markets using their technology, their memory microprocessor technology. Just try and think. 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
This time, the semiconductor industry was fairly young and very exciting. So there were lots of opportunities to travel and lots of opportunities to meet very interesting people. And as it evolved, I started to question, now, this is amazing technology, how were we able to develop these products, basically developing silicon sand into these amazing electronic circuits. And by chance, with Intel, I moved closer to their headquarters, which was in Swindon, in the UK. And by coincidence, this happened to be close to Silbury Hill. So my journey to work regularly took me past Silbury Hill, and while I was involved with discussing the development of these products, I started to think, well, where on earth did this amazing knowledge come from? So Silbury Hill, as the book title suggests, it started to dawn on me that something was happening here to our early evolution, and then I started to spend a little bit more time, initially as a interest, as a hobby, exploring Silbury Hill and the surrounding ancient monuments at Avebury and further south at Stonehenge.
Good.
Is that okay? I have a little bit of a break from it.
I'll just exit now. Okay. That's great as an introduction.
Is that okay?
Yeah. If you wanted to go back perhaps and say and maybe restate the part about I would drive past Silbury every day and it got me thinking, so we can kind of cut in between introduction and
some of that bit.
past
Yeah, some of the introduction is a little bit. I wasn't expecting the question, so I was a sort of. And you talk about yourself like this, you think, oh right, but that's sort of introduction side, but yeah. So just go back to regular journeys past Silbury Hill. Started to question where this amazing knowledge came from, especially when I was aware that our genetic makeup was very similar to that of our closest relative, the chimpanzee and the bonobo. So I started to spend a little bit more time exploring Silbury Hill, and of course at this time the crop circle phenomenon was in full swing, and again it just started to create an area of people interested to discuss their ideas and start to explore further this concept that we may have some sort of knowledge from pre-civilization. Once the book was published, the feedback was such that it started to discover that the idea, maybe the theory, maybe gained momentum, and lots of people added, supplying me with more information, and which was so we can get into this because I'm going to plug a second book, but so I can cut all that. So the bandwagon for the theory started to develop, but I needed proof. I needed to find some proof of a theory, because everyone has theories about the Egyptian pyramids with pharaohs, and again, we're starting to see, maybe starting to disprove these theories. Now back to this intelligence, pre-civilization intelligence. There are two areas of to prove this theory. One was looking at the human mind. If we were a development, if the human race was a development from an earlier civilization, very intelligent, highly intelligent civilization, then maybe we could, as we're slowly uncovering this knowledge, then maybe this is a way of finding out that this theory was in fact correct. But the other possibility was to look at some of the ancient monuments on the planet, and for local researcher like myself, this is the ideal way of trying to discover if indeed our knowledge did come from this pre-civilization. I'm trying to avoid using the extraterrestrial type idea.
Until the end.
Okay, so I don't want to. Okay, so I don't want to get into that.
Let me.
Yeah, because sorry, I'm just sorry.
If I prompt you, it might help you.
Yes, please.
I don't want you to have to struggle like
Yeah.
what I talk about next. So
Yep.
let's start with like the official English heritage view. What do they say that Silbury is? And don't forget just to add the question in there. Like English heritage think this is what they believe.
Okay. So you want me to do that now? Just English.
Yeah, would you mind?
Yeah. English heritage believe that Silbury Hill was a mound of chalk, a spoil heap, basically, from chalk excavated from nearby Avebury, the ditches from nearby Avebury. This idea was really confirmed with Atkinson, Professor Atkinson, when he carried out his dig in 1968, 1969, 70. And basically they discovered an antler early on in the dig near the side of the hill. And as the dig continued, and by the way, the dig was sponsored by the BBC, so they were making television programs to basically explain the hope of finding something magical at the centre of the hill. Of course, nothing was found, but they weren't really looking for anything other than something special at the centre of the hill, so there was no real serious archaeological work went on. And when the dig was complete, everything was abandoned, and the two things to emerge from this dig was, one, they eventually dated the antler to 4,600 years old, and somebody made a logical step that therefore Silbury Hill must be 4,600 years old. The other main thing that came from this dig was the fact that, yes, it confirmed that Silbury Hill was in fact a big mound of chalk. And that's how it was left. And I thought, in my lifetime, that's it. We're left with this idea that Silbury Hill is a mound of chalk. But Atkinson also left one other legacy, an unstable hill. And something had to be done about it. And this meant that this new conservation project, English Heritage Conservation Project, began in 2007. So I thought, yes, my prayers have been answered. I have an opportunity to revisit the site. And I was able to gain access to the tunnel and to many of the archaeologists and Skanska civil engineers working on the project. And wow, the information that we're finding, which English Heritage are still keeping under wraps, so the official message from them is Silbury Hill is still a chalk mound, but time will show they will need to basically explain themselves as to what exactly they have found. The disadvantage English heritage archaeologists have is that they are focused on Silbury Hill. And with modern technology, the World Wide Web and so on, I'm able to explore similar mounds throughout the world. And in fact, similar mounds in China are showing, that will be more carefully scrutinized, are showing that they are in fact step pyramids underneath these mounds of earth. So further investigation on the Silbury Hill project, evidence has been found to show that indeed Silbury Hill is likely to have been a huge chalk pyramid, probably 50 metres high, with a sarsen stone tip, a base of 40 metres square, with a moat probably 40 metres wide of indeterminable depth. So this is the sort of view that that seems to be coming from the English heritage research, but also from the supporting evidence from other digs which are already explained occurring in other parts of the world.
So let me just stop you
Yeah,
there. Let me
yeah.
prompt you here.
Mm.
So English heritage, they got it wrong basically. When you started looking at Silbury, so you'll start with when I started looking at Silbury, what was it that you noticed that immediately said to you, this is not just a chalk mound?
When I started looking at Silbury Hill, it was clear when I entered the tunnel that the hill had been structured. You saw this foundation, and you saw this. First thing that struck you was this amazing line of material, about 5 millimeters thick, which seemed to cover the complete base between the foundation and the structure. You could then see that the centre was a clearly defined phase, and then round the centre were some stakes. But interestingly, in the centre of phase 1 was a pile of gravel. So on further study, it appeared that this pile of gravel was sat on top of this sheet. Now I'm suggesting that this sheet is probably made of a mica type material called illite, which is a brown material. And of course, under the conditions in the hill now, it was soaking wet, and when you felt it, it had a butter texture to it. But interestingly, it was stone free, and this is currently being examined by English Heritage. But this form of mica, in the natural form, is actually in sheet format, so it can be moved. It's likely that this pile of gravel in the middle was positioned so that the sheet could be actually manipulated or moved into an accurate place. It may well be that the shape of the pyramid was already cut. So you had this square pyramid, and they were able to adjust the points, basically like all other pyramids we found, man-made pyramids, to point in the direction of the cardinal directions of north, south, east and west, or reflect the two equinoxes or the two solstices. So it seems that this sheet was manoeuvred carefully. So a pile of chalk, obviously, this situation goes completely against this fairly basic idea. So the fact that this was manoeuvred into place and then pegged down with a number of stakes in position around basically phase 1, and then phase 1 was constructed using layers of chalk and clay. Interestingly, at the top of phase 1, was in small pits were found flint flakes. Barry Bishop, the English Heritage flint flake specialist, was quite surprised to find that unusually in a hill or in a dig like this, the only place he found flint flakes were actually in these pits on top of phase 1. Were they a kind of date stamp saying this is 12,000 years old because this is the date that was associated with these flint flakes, or were they small transducers? And I'll talk about transducers a little bit later.
The flint flakes are 12,000 years old. So can you talk to us about how that really screws with the dating of Silbury?
Well, do I start with the flint?
You could start with the flint flakes. Kind of. I don't want to put words.
Okay.
Yeah.
The dating of the flint flakes is interesting in that obviously they're found in the centre of the hill, 12,000 years old. But I do have this theory, or I criticise English Heritage for their theory about the antler, which was an inherited item, albeit at the edge of the hill. And so I don't want to fall into that trap, if you like, of suggesting that here was items in the centre of the hill, because maybe they had been excavated from somewhere else and put in the hill. But it does seem strange that these flint flakes were unique to this part of the hill. And the date of 12,000 years actually fits in with my view of when Silbury Hill was built. The conventional view from English Heritage of 4,600 years old, I think, is far too early. It is likely to be something like 12,000, as the flint flakes indicate, or maybe even older, if assuming that the dating of these types of materials has still got some way to go and they're not maybe quite as accurate as we have at the moment. So the flint flakes was the first piece of almost transducer type material, but also interestingly, once phase 1 of the hill had been built, about 5 metres high, this was then surrounded by a series of monoliths, or small football-sized sarsen stones that surrounded phase 1. Phase 2 then began with a series of giant molehills, chalk clay molehills, which was dug from the surrounding perimeter of Silbury Hill. The Skanska engineers believe that there may have been as many as 5 circles of these huge molehills that circled phase 1, and then they were slowly increased in height to probably a height of about 40 metres, producing this core. Now the core is interesting because the material used, etc., seemed to be this chalk, clay, and I think I'll again talk about this a little bit later in terms of the importance of this core to the hill. Phase 3 then began, the more interesting phase, where bricks seem to have been used, again probably quarried from nearby, or maybe even quarried from the moat, which is the moat that was being dug around the hill to produce the structure. So we then find a square base, and this has again been indicated. We found bricks at the top of Silbury Hill, and they've been able to estimate the size of the brick. And how these bricks have been layered, that's something which we still need to find out. When Atkinson dug his tunnel in 1969, he had no idea, he had no inkling that it may have been a pyramid. So digging through these brick walls, which would probably by now look more like a dry stone wall, he would have been probably ignored, and they'd have just dug through it. But the chances are we could still do this now by looking at another part of the hill and looking at it through tunneling in from another side. But the chances of this is probably fairly slim, because I know English Heritage spent upwards of £4 million on this project to in fact make the hill safe. So it's now really been filled with chalk to stop it collapsing and remaining on the hill, on the landscape, as this large, what it probably is now, truly a large chalk mound, because they fill it with chalk. So this pyramid is stepped, and then at the top is capped with a huge piece of sarsen stone. The size of the sarsen stone, 2 large pieces have been removed by English Heritage, so we're not quite sure whether it's a fairly small cap or something more like an obelisk, as we see at the temple at Abu Ghurab in Egypt, which again would be interesting to discover just how big this sarsen stone cap is.
Should we talk a little bit about what you think each individual phase, the mica sheet, can you talk us through that, how the way you did downstairs?
Okay. Okay, so if we start to put the pieces together, we then find we have this mica sheet as the foundation between the base and the structure itself. It seems, looking at the contour map, that the place had been carefully selected. It had obviously been carefully positioned and then carefully built, clinically in fact constructed to a predefined plan. The exciting thing about Silbury Hill is it sits on a fairly high energy field. It's difficult to know at this stage whether this was produced by the people who built Silbury Hill or whether it was natural. My inclination is that it was something developed, produced by whoever built Silbury Hill, because the line, this huge ley line, does encircle the planet Earth, and it's amazing with different monuments, ancient monuments, and churches, cathedrals are actually on this line. So why a pyramid? What's the significance of a pyramid? Well, initial property of a pyramid is that it will focus energy from the Earth to a point. It will actually magnify any energies coming from the Earth. And there seem to be 2 quite important theories that I believe explain why Silbury Hill was constructed. The Earth is seen as a negative charge, the Sun as a positive charge. And in the natural world, many atoms will lose or gain electrons just it's due to heat sources, different energy sources, heat, light, and so on, and these atoms will give up their electrons or gain electrons. This process is known as ionization, and we then start to see a flow of ions moving from the positive Earth to the Sun, or to the ionosphere in a natural way. What the pyramid in fact does is it focuses this energy to a point. So we actually can see a voltage increasing from 100 volts per meter. So if you get a fairly high construction, then we can see that we'll get at the top, like thousands of volts going to be generated at the top. The other thing about this current is that obviously we have to mention this core has been produced, which again, with the ionic current passing through the pyramid, will produce a magnetic field on the outside of the pyramid, and the strength and the position and so on will depend on the material used in the core. But the really exciting thing is that this crystalline stone on the top acts as a piezoelectric transducer. What that means is, what a transducer does, it converts energy, one form of energy, into another. So for example, if you have a microphone, my sound wave will go into the microphone, will be converted to electric current. Electric current will pass down a wire, be amplified. Another transducer will convert it back into a sound wave. So this situation in Silbury Hill is the current passing through, gaining voltage as it heads towards this large piece of sarsen stone. Will convert that. The sarsen stone will convert that electrical energy into a frequency, into a sonar energy, and it has been demonstrated. The first application for this was by a French scientist at the beginning of the Second World War, who developed this piezoelectric transducer to in fact detect submarines. So basically a chirp would be sent and it would bounce off the submarine and would come back, the echo would come back, and they'd know exactly where it was in the distance. So he then asked the question, why are we producing pyramids that's emitting this high frequency signal into the cosmos? The other interesting theory is, I don't know if we keep away from the alien thing at the moment. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, actually,
Keep away from that just now.
I'm
Okay.
trying to turn my phone off. I've completely forgotten, sorry.
It's okay.
Can we talk about the kind of terrestrial functions first for the ionizers?
Yeah. Starting away. Okay. If we could envisage ourselves on a distant planet, having a conversation with the group captain, as it were, or whoever has organised the mission to colonise this blue planet. So what he would have in front of him would be survey reports suggesting the conditions that you'd expect to find on this blue planet. It is likely that surveyor missions would have explored and maybe produced some of these pyramid devices as tracking devices, communication, so that the colonization team can then fly down or head down and know exactly where to locate. It is likely that the gravitational pull on Earth was much greater than the home planet, and it's also likely, and this is a very significant point, it's also likely that the air quality or the quality of the atmosphere or the constituency of the atmosphere was different on Earth or the blue planet to the home planet, maybe just slightly different. So what I think one of the chief purposes of the pyramid and why they were built so clinically and so accurately was they were produced as ionizers. What I mean by this is that the pyramid would take ions from water and ionize the water and produce a atmosphere around a pyramid, almost like a bubble of an air quality that was important to the extraterrestrial visitor. Now, the magnetic field generated by the pyramid would also act as a bubble to contain these ions within a particular radius. And these experiments have been happening now, in fact in Russia, where they are finding that these pyramids are purifying air, and also the side effect is crops growing nearby grow much stronger, much healthier, and much quicker. We've also discovered back in the 1860s that the quality of people with breathing disorders or sorry, just
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. Anyway, people with breathing difficulties. Just lost that for a minute. Just come back.
Do you want to take a minute?
Yeah.
To think about it. It's not
Yeah.
problem.
What's that when you got breathing problems?
Asthma?
Yes, asthma.
T-
What do you call it? Yeah, what's the general term they use? Oh God.
What would that be?
That's respiratory diseases. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, discovered that in Poland and Russia, people with respiratory diseases would be taken down into these tunnels where this air appeared, as we now discover, appeared to have been ionized, and it helped cure these problems. We see ion generators used in air conditioning to again improve the quality of the air. So to me it seems that someone with a very high level of intelligence needed to create bubbles of refined air so that this would enable them to work or operate on this planet. We're looking at this idea on the moon, where we're planning to maybe build bubbles that we will fill with. How we're going to do this, we'll probably be tapping into water beneath the surface and again ionizing it. So again, we're just reinventing what we already had on this planet thousands of years ago. So the complexity of the pyramid, the initial complexity of the pyramid, was for this very practical purpose. That the key element to life was being able to absorb the atmosphere and allow these extraterrestrials to breathe. I think the pyramid was a structure that was so complex that it would be multifunctional. So we have this ion generator to create this bubble of atmosphere that is pure enough and healthy enough for the early extraterrestrials to breathe, and also some kind of transmitting signaling device, transmitter receiver, to explain where any passing traveller could find out and locate exactly where they were. Some Russian scientists have actually discovered that each pyramid needs its own unique frequency. So you can't actually be like a air traffic control as we see today. You're flying over, I'm flying into London Heathrow, and I know exactly where it is because of the frequencies generated. Again, we're reinventing what may have been already on this planet thousands of years ago.
Can you talk a little bit about other possible uses of ionization? Some of the Russian work, and tie that in perhaps if you could to the Bosnian pyramids, the China pyramids, the fact that they all seem to be
Okay, good.
same function.
Yeah. The ionization of practical use of ionization. Start again. Ionization is not only restricted to Silbury Hill or the Silbury Pyramid. As I mentioned earlier, all pyramids have this common feature of water flowing either beneath or around each pyramid. We see it even in the recently discovered Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, the Bosnian Pyramid in South America, Egypt, and so on. So water is a common feature throughout all pyramids. It's a significant part, obviously, of this ionization process. Today, with our pollution in places, some cities in China and Russia, pollution is at a point where scientists are now looking at this ancient technology, this pyramid technology, to in fact improve the air quality. And I think we may well see pyramids reappearing across the planet as our pollution levels increase, and it may well help be an important tool in combating solving some of the green issues.
Let's see. Covered Silbury, the device. Oh yeah, can we talk a little bit about a little more about the harmonics, the frequency of these pyramids, and how each one it appears to be. I mean, you touched on it a little bit. Has its unique signature, and then also how potentially they can be. They can store mass amounts of energy and information even.
Okay. The other interesting thing we're finding from the pyramids around the world is they are all emitting their own unique frequency. Some of these frequencies seem to be fairly powerful and obviously head out into the cosmos, and it is likely, as we've found with radio television signals, that they can attach signals to these waves, these ultrasonic waves. Now, someone has suggested that close by to Silbury Hill, for example, is this huge stone circle complex. Transducers are used to convert electrical energy into heat, light, sound, and vice versa. So is it possible that some of the energy coming from the cosmos may have been converted by the pyramid into information, and this information in turn potentially stored on stone, and large stones we see in places like Silbury Hill, and we see it in the Orkneys and all different areas around the world. Today we find close links between the computer technology, communication technology, and these ancient civilizations. So, for example, if we have a CD, we have a film on it. If anything happened to our civilization in years to come, picking up this disc, no one would realise that there's actually a lot of information stored on this disc. So, is it possible that we can see someone had the technology to communicate, to ionize, convert atoms, to convert elements on this planet, convert elements on this planet for the benefit of the health of the individuals arriving on the planet. So the technology was here. If we are just reinventing the knowledge they had, then it is likely that they would have found a way to have stored information in crystalline stone structures.
Let's go into the crystalline bit, because that's really interesting. How quartz, and you talk about this, can turn mechanical energy into electrical energy and vice versa, which makes it particularly useful for storing and then transmitting, releasing this data, and how the stones all seem to be somewhat piezoelectric, if I'm not.
Scientists discovered this effect with crystalline stones. It can be granite, sarsen stone, or salt. They have this effect of converting signals, electrical signals, into a very stable acoustic signal. And this is something being discovered really in the last 100 or so years. And as I mentioned earlier, the first development of the piezoelectric transducer was in the last century, at the beginning of the Second World War, where it was used to produce these sonar signals. Not sure what I think there's a whole list of things there I had in my mind, but it's anyway. I'll have a break for a second on that.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Let's go back to Silver. And I'll ask you this question: does it seem like the crop circles are drawing our attention back to these technologies, if you want to call them that?
The interesting modern phenomena of crop circles has been linked to these ancient mounds and structures around Wiltshire, for example. It's clear, having talked to some local archaeologists, that at one time were literally hundreds, possibly hundreds of pyramids around this area. Today there's only a few exist, but it is likely there were quite high number of pyramids. Lost the thread there. What was that again?
Do other crop circles?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Pushing us towards these sites, this technology. Yeah.
So it is likely that this area was a complex comprised of pyramids, may have been temples, been some unusual structures which we see at Stonehenge. We seem to see a very sturdy, solid base being built, but what was on top of that, we'll probably never find out. But the point being that there's a lot of transducing devices, if you like, around in this area, which have long since disappeared. Maybe some of the fragments of these structures have remained on Earth, in the ground, and signals are still somehow trying to get back to these receiving devices, which again, as we see with Silbury Hill, are no longer functional. There may be some effect we see in crops fields where individual crop stems may be attracting some of this energy, and in some cases the new moist stem will convert that energy into maybe heat energy, and this sometimes explains why some of these stems explode and move. We can also see energy can be converted into magnetic energy, which again can twist and move the stem. My concern or problem with this idea is we would think we'd be seeing it in a more natural way. So if energy was coming down, maybe picking up some transducer elements, still fragments, if you like, in the field, and it was being drawn to these elements, and in turn some of these elements were able to reconstruct the signal as we see with television signals, and somehow use each crop stem as some kind of pixel and move it in a particular shape. I can understand this is feasible, but the fact that it doesn't happen on a sort of it doesn't happen in a way that people can just see it happening. I'm aware of people having seen crop circles being formed, but I personally haven't. And again, from my perspective, the jury's out until I maybe talk to someone or see it happening. But they all seem to be fairly mysterious, and this is probably part of the crop circle enigma, is that they are happening at times where no one's basically able to see them forming. So if we go back to this idea that energy is being returning, if you like, signals are returning from outer space back to our planet, missing the transmitters, if you like, because they can't find them, they're no longer there, and somehow the signals are trying to find somewhere to go, then this is a possible way this may happen, except you'd think you'd be seeing it more easily, more frequently in the fields. But
technology to us, perhaps.
I think crop circles are suggesting the technology, because they do seem to be producing ancient symbols, ancient pieces of information. Some of it we are aware of in different ancient cultures, Egyptian cultures and so on, and some we're obviously not aware of because that information is all gone. So it is very strange that symbols of thousands of years ago are occurring in this area, in fields in this area, in crop circles. I have two takes on it. One is the hoaxer. There could well be somebody who, with his own will, decides, I want to produce a crop circle, and can go out and produce a crop circle. There may well be an individual who is actually, something is channeled through them to go and produce crop circles. So they're not actually under control. It's not under their control. It is something that they feel, it's almost like one of these pens, or it gets moved around by another external force. So somehow the human being is acting as a sort of mini transducer for the signal that comes through to, or a number of human beings, to produce this particular shape. Sounds a bit far-fetched from where we've been with stones and pseudoelectric transducers, but it is a possibility that I've talked to people who make crop circles, and they have said they've been building they produce a crop circle in a field, and they didn't think it was too good, and the next day when they saw it, it was absolutely amazing. So there may well be some subconscious activity going on, which is channeling some of these signals through the actual human mind or the human transducer. But going back to the natural stone, I think it's probably unlikely that the stone, maybe the fragments of the stone now found in the fields, the signal is returning, looking for the transducer. It's being pulled down through the stems of the crop circle into the earth, and the effect of this energy passing through the new growing moist stem is to convert some of that electrical energy or sonar energy into heat. Also possible that some of this energy may have been converted into light, because there has been people observed balls of light flying about in crop circles. So there is a number of possibilities that indicate that some of these signals were transmitted from our planet thousands of years ago, and answers are coming back. But how we find them but there is something in it. There's something happening here, something significant happening here, that these patterns are actually appearing in crop circle, in fields.
Let's get into the alien visitor gene and give you free rein here.
Okay.
And how that ties into Silbury Pyramid and the terraforming aspect of it, so you can really let loose. Yeah.
Okay. My time in the semiconductor industry led me to believe that we are truly amazing individuals. The human race is an amazing race. I then, through further research, began to realize that we all have a fantastic amount of knowledge in our brains. Some of it can be accessed accidentally. People have autism, Asperger's and so on, and we get these people with these insights into our genius that we all have, this mathematical, musical, we use the term savant when we talk about these individuals with these remarkable powers. If we go back through history, Mozart, Einstein and so on, they all had problems at birth. So they had difficulties during the pregnancy, and I believe this gave them the benefit of getting access to some of this information further deeper into our subconscious. So where does this information come from? The regular journeys past Silbury Hill made me realise that there's something going on here, and that Silbury Hill may in fact have witnessed some of the early stages of our human evolution. So what do I mean by this? I believe that extraterrestrials landed on this planet probably around 13,000 years ago. If we move forward to 10,500 years ago, there was clearly a massive flood that destroyed parts of the planet. This flood is recorded in all religions, including in Christianity and Genesis. We hear of Noah's flood. Biologists, marine biologists, geologists and so on, they are now piecing together the fact that this happened, and they're trying to work out exactly where it happened. Now this may have been caused by an asteroid strike, or may have just been some huge volcanic eruption, but this produced a huge tsunami that engulfed quite a large part of the planet. It seems to me that Silbury Hill, probably looking at the geology of it now and the Ordnance Survey side of it, may well have missed a large part of the flooding, but certainly clearly around the Mediterranean area, the Red Sea, the Caspian Sea and so on, there was clearly a massive wave spread across this area. So the civilization prior to this was split and disappeared. It could no longer function because the communication between them had been destroyed. So what we're seeing after 10,500 years is a civilization in decline. So I believe the Egyptian civilization, other civilizations at this time were in decline. So then we go back before 10,500 towards 13,000 years ago. The Ice Age was disappearing. So this creates this period of time when such an event may have happened. although it is likely that the climate would have changed if it had an asteroid strike, I should say. 10,500 years ago, this will have moved the climate, but allowing for this, then it's likely that the area where the extraterrestrials likely to have landed had a reasonable climate 13,000 years ago. Now, genealogists are DNA experts are beginning to piece together the fact that we did seem to come from a single point. And this out of Africa theory suggests that it was somewhere in Africa, but this is still being studied at the moment. So, what this means is, did extraterrestrial land on this planet and somehow bred with or genetically manipulated the local species of Homo sapien? And if this occurred, as per Darwin's theory, those Homo sapiens with this intelligent gene became smarter and therefore outgrew and outdeveloped the normal species on the planet. So what we have here is a smart Homo sapien. So prior to the disaster, the flood, there would be clearly a master-slave relationship, and there'd be very much under control, and this would be a golden era where all these pyramids and structures and communications had been built. Interesting theory, but how could that possibly be proved to be the case? If this did in fact happen, then the human race evolved from this almost single point, from the extraterrestrial interbreeding or genetically manipulating and educating the Homo species. We will have inherited, I call this transgenerational gene. It will have been passed from one generation to another, and as we go through the centuries, we're slowly uncovering this knowledge. So the knowledge we have today is basically the history of this extraterrestrial civilization. We can find out, explore our mind, this memory gene, and this has in fact been done under the new science microbiology called epigenetics. This is obviously a specialist area which is developing. It's an area that I don't want to delve too much into. But where I can find evidence of this extraterrestrial landing is through the ancient monuments on the planet, namely pyramids. By studying pyramids, I believe we can start to get some insight into this alien race that arrived on the planet 13,000 years ago.
Okay, that's good. Do you want to talk about Cydonia at all? Have you looked at Mars? Because it does fit into your theory quite nicely.
An example of where we're recovering information from the source is the fact that scientists have recently at a conference in Strasbourg where they're planning to build like what they call a doomsday ark on the moon. In this ark, they're planning to plant or dig chambers to hold information vital to the survival of a future civilization. And on the top of this information, they're building a transmitting receiving device. So this will be transmitting signals back and forth to Earth. So this contact will be the first, if you like, contact that will be made. Two functions for this. One is obviously to start the development of the moon, and two, if there was a disaster on Earth, a nuclear attack or so on, then we will have a human presence on another planet, which is just exactly what has happened here on Earth, I say around 13,000 years ago. I think every day I discover, or someone sends me information, or I read about something that makes me believe that this theory is a viable theory.
Okay,
Go for it.
Good soundbite. Hutch?
Yeah, I don't have anything.
No questions. Pretty deep stuff. Can we talk about 13,000, or especially 12,000 years ago? The dating for Silbury coincides almost perfectly with Bevol, Hancock and West's archaeoastronomy. You know, they reverse engineered the archaeoastronomy of the alignments of Giza, and it took them to 10,500 BC. So it's interesting. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but how the Giza complex backs up this dating of the Silbury of the slate. So what do we call it?
Flip slate, yeah. Okay. Let me see. The date, I suggest, for Silbury Hill being 13,000 years ago, seems to be common to pyramids in other parts of the world. So it seems to me that these pyramids were built in a dynasty probably encompassing a few thousand years, and this happened across the planet. We've already found measurements and built in bricks in one part of the world very similar, if not identical, to the similar measurements in other pyramids in other parts of the world. We've also found in Egyptian pyramids, other researchers have discovered that the alignment of the Great Pyramids, going back to 11,000 years, match the information that they have discovered. Well, I have to take a step back on here. What was it again? It was because there was something quite important.
These correlations you find pyramids seem to be very similar. Giza, in terms of dating, 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But also in terms of design and what they're doing, it's almost identical.
In the Egyptian pyramids, astrologically, they've discovered that they seem to have been built in a similar time, 12,000, 13,000 years ago. So the interesting fact here is that across the world, we are having these structures being built at a similar period of time.
Okay. So, we kind of lost that.
Yeah.
And maybe there's another point you can make if you're into it. I'm not trying to lead.
No. Please, I'll keep forgetting things.
They seem very similar in technology, same time period of construction, and the grid. You know, they're all on the grid. Are you familiar with the?
Yeah.
It must be. Yeah. So it seems kind of simple to you and I that almost a given that they're on a grid of some kind. But just so the viewer knows that.
Yeah.
So it's like the technology, the dating is the same, and they're obviously all on this Earth grid.
Yeah, the technology and the dating seem to indicate that they were built at a similar period of time. What's also interesting, all these structures seem to be very clearly visible from the sky. And we go to the Peru, for example, the Nazca lines are clear examples of this ability to see information from the sky. It would also mean that suggestion that some of these ley line energies were produced as guide, like motorways almost, between these different structures, between these different places. If we look at something like this, a hill, using this ionization generator to produce this refined air, what we must have next to these places are cities or towns. So again, towns, in fact, we're possibly developing into cities. So we're then starting to link these places together using, again, ley line energy, which again can be picked up as highways from above and able to move between one place and another. So I firmly believe that ley lines are not natural lines of energy on the planet, but they have been created by, again, this very clever extraterrestrial civilization.
That's great. Going back to your extraterrestrial civilization, they show up, they give us this technology or to themselves, or they use it. Can you talk about where they might be now?
Question could be asked, what happened to this extraterrestrial civilization? Somebody start again. My stomach's rumbling.
Yeah, mine too.
Is that yours?
It's me.
Yeah,
I can't blame you. The question asked is, well, what happened to this extraterrestrial colonization group? It was probably a small group of people that arrived. I believe that the disaster that occurred was so swift that they maybe didn't get the opportunity to abandon the planet. The huge tsunami would have completely covered and immersed any of bodies and so on, and we're not talking about large numbers at this early stage, albeit they've been here for a few thousand years. We're talking about probably pockets of people with this extraterrestrial stroke Homo sapien type early human being. So to find them, again, future technology may help to penetrate the sands of Egypt or the depths of the Mediterranean to locate Atlantis or to locate these unusual bodies. We have already found skeletons of unusually tall beings, and we've also found some very unusual shaped skulls. So these may well be offspring of some of the very early. They may well be some of the very early offspring of the alien visitor Homo sapien. In other words, the human being. Just trying to think again here. So, I guess the question may also arise: well, is there anyone coming back to search for the group who came to colonize the blue planet 13,000 years ago? Well, we see reports almost daily now of UFOs circling the planet. So maybe their orbit is such they're now coming closer to Earth and beginning to have a closer look to see what has happened. Maybe they see it as an experiment and they're just looking at the progress or otherwise of the experiment, or maybe it all disappeared in the flood, everything went, and we are back out as an isolated planet in the huge galaxy. The fact that there's life elsewhere, I think, is now becoming clear, and I think maybe even in my lifetime life will be discovered on some distant planet, albeit of a microbiological nature. Nevertheless, it will be discovered. And that's just the first small step to realizing that yes, more intelligent beings are out there somewhere.
So what you could be saying is, if you want to know what happened to the aliens, you really should go look in the mirror, because perhaps we are the aliens. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Can you respond to that?
Oh gosh, there's such a good question, and there's so many people who've come up with some very good answers. I think the best answer is I think where are the aliens? Who are the aliens? I think, following my theory, I think if we look in the mirror, we are in fact we are part of an extraterrestrial race. Because it also is very likely that we will head out into space to do what our ancestors did in arriving at our planet. I often get people saying they feel special, they feel different, I almost feel alien. I have this feeling that they feel a bit alien. We're so different, we're so completely different to any other creature on the planet, to the point where we can dominate our environment and we can dominate all other creatures on Earth. Interesting to surmise that as we're developing our DNA techniques and so on, that one day we actually generate or create a smart chimpanzee by implanting some human DNA, so increasing their level of DNA closer to ours. The temptation must be there, if it is not already happening, to find in the future chimpanzee able to drive a car and communicate in a language. It's also interesting to have the conversation that if anything did happen to us in a future disaster, who would survive? Us, the human being, or the smart chimpanzee? I think I should write a book called Planet of the Apes. Well, I think it's maybe already been done. Sorry, throw that one in.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess the other question is, crop circles going up in number every season, sightings of UFOs increasing, all this information on pyramids now coming out to the forefront. It's like a quickening of some kind, isn't it? And can you comment on that? Do you think perhaps we're on a schedule here and we're approaching, like you said, contact of some kind?
I've often been asked, are things speeding up? We seem to be sighting more UFOs. Crop circle patterns are becoming more complex. What's going on? Is something occurring? It was interesting. I watched a program on television called Torchwood, and it seemed if you didn't believe in aliens or extraterrestrials, you were somehow odd. 5-10 years ago, or when I first brought up my book, I was almost looked on as a little bit of a crank, believing in extraterrestrials, UFOs, and so on. But it seems now, it's now the opposite. If you don't believe in extraterrestrials and UFOs, then you're a crank. So that change has actually only occurred in the last few years. So are we being prepared for something? Again, with my theory, I believe that subconsciously we all have masses of information. And somehow, maybe the people who collected the information and gathered information, that kept it, are still kind of programming us. We're easily programmed. One of my messages I always give to people is try to get control of your own subconscious, but it's so easy. We call it advertising, marketing. Women in the 20s, oh, you were real classy if you could smoke a cigarette. Oh, you're a real hard John Wayne type guy if you could smoke a cigarette. So it was easy to sell. Going to war is very easy to whip up hate against a religion or a country or a nationality. It's so easy. We must change this. But back to the idea that maybe we are being prepared for something. You find this with pandemics. At the moment we have the swine flu, you're almost being prepared for something worse, because we just accept, swine flu. Oh yeah, it's okay. So we're now conscious of it and we can accept it. And so if something significant did happen, then we kind of all go along with it. Back to the UFO extraterrestrial side, then maybe something is moving forward, and maybe something is about to happen in the near future. And we'll be prepared for it, but again through the subliminal, subconscious activity from the handful of people who I believe potentially control our destiny on this planet.
Okay. Any questions? No? Let me just ask you, John, if there's anything I've forgotten to ask you that you really would like to comment on, now is the time to throw it out there.
I'm sure there is, but yeah.
Pretty vast subject.
I know it's true. It's this is the thing I find. Just let me think. Some feedback back from recent lectures and stuff.
Talk about the experiment, if we ever want to show it, if he has a voiceover cutaway of him talking about the experiment with the hanging.
Oh yeah, the hanging.
Yeah.
Hanging. I don't know if we can do that somewhere. You can put that in. Let's do the.
Just describe it, and then if we want to get the shots later, we can do it wherever we are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's just,
Okay. It's obviously come somewhere earlier on in the whole thing. The property of the pyramid can be demonstrated quite simply, and I know pretty unscientifically. But if you suspend a pyramid and hold it still, move away, obviously in a still room, and then approach it with your hands together, maybe an inch apart, and point it to the corner of the pyramid, you will slowly see it rotate. Similar thing can happen if you put a glass of water and a few inches below the base of the pyramid. It will rotate potentially in a different direction. What we're seeing here is, we mentioned earlier, ions are being produced from a human being, which is obviously earth to the ground, or the water is being ionized, and those ions are being sucked up through the pyramid into towards the positive charge, which is in the ionosphere. So the effect of this, because the pyramid is suspended, it will cause a rotating movement. So basically it's a very quick and simple way of showing how the pyramid can draw energy very quickly from the earth, either through us or through a glass of water. Someone has suggested that placing razor blades underneath the pyramid, suspended pyramid, means they never go blunt. But I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's something I need to try. There's lots of other experiments. Just to qualify this, they are non-scientific, so they're done. It's a bit of fun, but again, looking at things like sarsen stone, different crystalline stone, you can play around with moving them in close proximity to the pyramid and just see how the pyramid reacts. Maybe not so sure about the last bit, but the main bit is this: the hands in the water, just to show the movement. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Okay, let me just have a quick think. I don't want to miss anything here. Could you talk about the pyramid as a consciousness, altering consciousness? I mean, or is that not your?
That's probably not my bag. I think it's worth just looking at the levels of consciousness. I think in relation to this transgenerational gene, it's very obvious that when a new baby is born, you immediately look at the looks and suggest, he's got his mother's eyes or his grandparents' hair, nose, or whatever. And obviously, you've got to be very diplomatic at this time when you make comments about a newborn baby. So you can see the physical features, but we all automatically are born with an operating system, a human operating system. It's similar to Bill Gates's Windows 2000, Windows XP, Windows Vista. So it's something that's allowed him to become the richest man on earth, especially if everybody bought the software and not just copied it. Got all that. But this operating system means that you don't have to think about things. You automatically know how to breathe. You know how to. If you throw a baby into a swimming pool, it will know how to float back up and so on and survive. Has surviving techniques. If you have an operating system in a cat, it likes milk and fish and does all the things that cats do. So we come with that core, if you like, of operating system. But around the core are circles of information going back probably 500 generations. And this is deeply embedded in the human brain at the subconscious level. So consciously, we live in the moment. The Buddhists like this idea. We live for the moment. So that is your lifespan on earth, and this is happening here and now. But immediately, it goes into the unconscious. So you're in your conscious, then it goes into unconscious. And then you're down to this level of subconscious. So the human mind has multi-layers of memory. And it's a huge memory. We talk about computers now going up into terabytes and exabytes and yottabytes and so on, but it still doesn't compare with the amount of memory that we have. So this huge memory has stored, there's a storage, almost like a hard disk drive in our brain with all this knowledge going back through the centuries. And I think it'll be exciting, but probably quite frightening if we could actually tap into this and find out, almost re-record information that happened in a past generation, bits you're still carrying with you in your transgenerational gene. So back to this idea of subconscious memory, it can be manipulated in terms of people putting ideas in it that you're not aware of. So this is something which is going on that most of us don't even look into. having said that, over the centuries, people have tried through drug taking, fasting, all sorts of techniques to extract this information, because we know it's there. It's just past generations don't know how to extract it, and we still don't know how to extract it, but somewhere in the future it's like finding a cure for typhoid. In our generation we can benefit from it, and in the future generations they will benefit from finding out how to get to this knowledge, but it's there, and this makes us different from our closest relative.
Excellent.
Don't know if I asked that question.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've got the transgenerational gene thing in, so that's
Yeah.
because that's quite
The epigenetics. Yeah.
the epigenetics. You need to. I think with the introduction of the World Wide Web, it is amazing just what information is at our fingertips. And that's why I always put keywords at the end of a presentation, because it means somebody can jot them down and in their own free time get on the internet, Google them, and then explore their own mind, their own information.
Yeah.
This is basically my small piece of the jigsaw, and it's good luck finding your piece of the jigsaw.
Really good. Thank you. That was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think it's,
Good job. Good.
okay, you happy with that?
Yeah.
I hope it's okay. Thanks, Eric.
No, there's lots of good usable stuff there.
Is there?
We're going to intercut it with all your pictures of Silbury and all the data. And
Okay, because you got lots of other stuff from other things as well. You can
yeah,
use.
we have, like for instance, while you're talking about